Does God care about small places? How can we faithfully serve Christ in a rural context? What is the future of the church in rural America? The Rural Ministry Podcast deals with questions like this and much more in the hopes of bringing practical resources and inspiring stories to help the church flourish in rural communities. Dr. Charlie Cotterman is the Executive Director at the Center for Rural Ministry, Assistant Professor of Biblical Studies at Grove City College, and the pastor of a rural church in Oil City, Pennsylvania. Join the conversation as we journey into the good things God is doing in small places. All right, well, welcome to another episode of the Rural Ministry Podcast, where we talk about the unique challenges and joys of living and doing ministry in rural places. I'm your host, Garrett Heath, Director of Media and Communications at the Center for Rural Ministry at Grove City College, and I'm joined, as usual, by my co-host, Dr. Charlie Cotterman. Charlie's the Executive Director at the Center for Rural Ministry, Assistant Professor of Biblical Studies at Grove City College, and the pastor of Oil City Vineyard Church in Oil City, Pennsylvania. So today, as the title suggests, we are talking about mentorship, specifically how to find a mentor. Because behind everyone's journey, whether it be into ministry, business, education, athletics, or really whatever field you might find yourself in, there lies a path that was inevitably paved by a mentor, or two, or three, or so on and so forth. So it's easy to take this for granted, but we are shaped and molded into the people we become by the people we allow to speak into our lives, right? So mentorship is really vital, not just to some vocation that we hope to pursue, but really to the very trajectory of our lives, and most importantly, toward the kind of character that we'll build on our journey into Christ. And Charlie, I know this is a topic near and dear to your heart, and it's actually kind of funny how this falls. We actually just had a mentor of yours on our last episode, right?
Right. Yeah, Scott Sundquist has been a huge influence in my life, for sure. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about this one. This is really tied into like my story, and is tied into my experience as a professor and as a pastor. So yeah, I'd love to help folks think about how to find a mentor, which feels like $1 million question, or at least that's the way it's built up. And maybe we're going to kind of try to.
There's high expectations after people read the title here. So
that's right. But I think those expectations are part of the thing I want to address today.
Yes.
So let me give some backstory. So a fall or two ago, I had a student. A student was a senior in my class. Came into my office and was like, would you be a mentor to me? And I mean, on some level, the question was kind of like flattering and also super thought-provoking, because I'm like, I don't even know if I can do this, or like, what's this mean? And it also took me way back in my life to my early 20s. And I could identify what he was saying, because I knew the feeling of being that kind of right at the end of college, looking for someone to help me discern next steps, help me think about my future and just what it meant to grow up, really. Mm-hmm. And so that question prompted me kind of as I said, well, give me some time to think about it. And I thought about it. And one of the things I did is draft this 10-point list about how to find a mentor. And I gave it to the student. We had a great conversation about it. And so that's kind of what I want to walk through today. So this is really like 10 steps to thinking about how to find a mentor.
I like it. I mean, I do want to say out of the gate too that it is a really important thing, right? Especially that stage of your life. I mean, I remember when I was there as well, like you need to have a mentor, really, right? I mean, even if it's not like this official in an official capacity or something, but in some ways you will have a mentor even, right? It's almost inevitable that you'll be mentored by somebody.
Yes.
So, right. I mean, the fact that somebody watching this like is actually maybe seeking this and looking for the right person is actually a sign that you're probably on the right track, right?
That's right. The intentionality is good. I think what I'm trying to do with this is dial down the pressure.
Yeah.
And we'll even talk about that a little bit later because that's one of my 10 things. But I think so. Take a deep breath if you're listening to this, and we're going to try to dial down the pressure, and we're going to try to help us think about the way God takes care of us, because God takes care of us. The things we need, God provides, and we need friendship. We need people in our lives that are a step ahead. And I truly believe that God provides. The question is, are we paying attention? So that's my first thing. Number one on my list, pay attention to the folks who are already part of your story. I think sometimes one of the things that goes wrong with this idea of mentorship, and I will say, I know this from experience, that like sometimes you identify someone that you're like, I want to be like them when I grow up.
Mm-hmm.
And they're kind of like maybe tangential to your story. Like there really is not a lot of overlap. But because you've identified this is the person, you end up trying to make your story overlap in a kind of forced way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that ends up into doing a lot of things. Like for me, it ended up leading me to like quit my job and move across multiple states to try to find a mentor. And if you want to know how that went, you can read a piece I wrote about it, because it didn't turn out like I thought. We'll put it that way. And it was as much my fault as anyone else's. I'll say that. But when we have this one-dimensional view, and I think that's what does it. Like for me, there was this kind of like person that seemed like this could be my mentor, like, and it's singular. That's important. When you start talking about mentor as in a singular, that's, and I think I get where it comes from. It comes from like Paul and Timothy on one sense. For people that have been in kind of the church, it's like Paul had his Timothy, right? But Paul also had Silas, and they had many people,
Yes.
right? But when we start making it a singular thing, this person, we end up, I think, missing the mentoring moments that fill our lives. I think God gives us mentoring moments all through our life, where there are people that come into our life in the moment, in a season, that are mentors. And if we have this, I just need this one person to be my mentor, we're going to miss it. So be ready. A mentor might surprise you. Someone who didn't seem like a mentor might become one, right? And this is one of the things I think too, thinking about my story, and we probably both would say this, I think, Garrett, is that like sometimes you only realize things in retrospect about how much a mentor actually influenced you.
I agree there, and that's almost why it's important to have a mentor in some capacity who's advanced on that path as well. Like they've already learned some of these hard lessons, right? So that I think that's going to come into this conversation probably at some point.
Yep.
I think one of the things you hit on there too is that singularity that can almost border on like that person being a hero. And there's a difference between a hero and a mentor.
Right.
Right. And that might move into your second point here, actually.
Yeah. Right.
Really well.
So so there's no one size fits all definition of mentorship. So pay attention. And then the idea of hero, and this is my second point, beware of the celebrity mentor mentality, right? And what this looks like is when we look for mentors that are just in some way kind of like beyond our current life, and they're really prominent, and so we see them succeeding at what they do, and we say, I want that, right? So on the one hand, that's good. You want to learn from great people. You want to see people doing a great job. But I think one thing that kind of the negative side of that I've seen is this idea that if I could just somehow get connected with this person, it would actually increase my status and my value by association. Yep. And I think that's where the celebrity mentor thing breaks down. Because if you're looking for this mentor to somehow make you more valuable or by association increase your status, you're looking for something that no human being can truly do, because God gives us our value. And also you're going to be disappointed, So just be aware that if you're looking for someone to mentor you, that like 100 other people want to mentor them, not only does that person not have time to mentor you, but you might be wanting something that mentorship's not even supposed to provide.
Well, in this, I think this temptation is so much greater in our day and age in some ways. And this is kind of the age of influencers as
Mhm.
well, right? So, I mean, you're jumping on different social media platforms, YouTube, to like you can learn so much from so many people
Yep.
through these platforms, and that's a beautiful thing. However, you can also twist that and like so many people just want to be like somebody that they see on their screen, right? And chase down that image of somebody that you're not even intended to be, right?
Right. 100%. And I think, one thing we have to realize too is there are different ways that celebrity work in our lives. So it's not just like the big time influencers I'm talking about.
That's
It
right.
is relative to some degree. Like there could be someone in your denomination, if you're a young pastor or something, who's a celebrity in that denomination that outside of that denomination, no one knows about. But
Yep.
inside the denomination, everybody knows about this person and everyone's jockeying to kind of have time with that person, right? So it can happen like that in a small town, like with the small town mayor or someone who's prominent in a local place.
Yep.
And I think that same kind of association and hoping that association can somehow raise our status is a real concern. So
Yep.
just be aware and kind of look in the mirror, I think, if you're looking for a mentor and say, like, what am I actually thinking this mentor is going to do for me? Am I hoping to increase my status or something by association? That's different than actually learning like valuable life lessons and skills from someone.
Mhm.
So that I think this gets us to the third point. The third thing I told this student was to think about life stage and capacity. Now, this was very much pertinent for me because I have 4 kids, like at that point, like 12 and under. And, I'm coaching youth sports, I'm pastoring a church, and I'm working out here at the Center for Rural Ministry. And like my capacity was low. And most people in this life stage are going to have limited capacity, as you yourself know, right?
I do
So,
know a thing or two about that. Yeah.
yeah, that's right. And so, when you're thinking about a mentor, you have to think about, does the person actually have time to actually do what I expect them to do? And that's, clarifying the relationship, is an important thing there. Because sometimes we think my mentor's gonna meet with me every other week for breakfast. They're gonna like invest in my life. They're gonna take my phone calls and
That's right.
text.
These expectations are so significant, right? I mean, throughout most of these points, really, but like if you have one expectation and this mentor has different expectations, like it's not going to work, right?
Right. And you know how it goes. I mean, this is how we humans are. Like, you know, in middle school, if you like a girl, like you probably like imagine all the conversations and she likes you back in those, right? But like I think we can project things on like we think, of course, if I say, "Will you be my mentor?" and the person says, "Sure," we think, "I know what that means. I have projected exact." But really,
Yes.
I mean, like I'm just in your corner once in a while. We can chat, but you have a whole like we're doing a book study. We're doing, and so this life stage thing matters. I know when my wife and I moved multiple states away, and really one of the key motivators was for me to pursue this mentoring relationship. And I didn't even think about. I mean, we hadn't had kids at that time, but this mentor had young kids, a new job, a family. I didn't even think about the capacity, and I think that was part of the expectation that I brought that set me up for failure because I just didn't even think about that. Right. So especially if you're young and you haven't thought about like, what does it take to have a family and have kids and have a job or multiple jobs, think about the mentor you're looking at and what is that person's actual capacity and what are my expectations?
Hmm.
And I think this leads to the fourth point I have, which is to think about proximity and life overlap. When you're looking for a mentor, part of paying attention, part of not seeking a celebrity mentor, is actually thinking about who has God put in my life and who is my life overlapping with. I think mentoring relationships are the most fruitful when they just naturally and organically overlap with our lives, where there's just shared relationships and there's shared opportunities to watch each other just be a human being or watch each other use the skills that we want to see. And it's hard for a mentor, I've found, to speak into your life if they're
Yeah.
not involved in your life.
I mean, I see in your notes here this idea of apprenticeship. I mean, this initially struck me as just a really good way to think through this, right? You want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. So if you think about kind of the way that we have passed on skills and knowledge historically, um, it's been through this process of apprenticeship, doing things together. Talk about proximity and life overlap, right? You know,
Hmm.
there's a shoemaker, and I apprenticed with him for 2 years making shoes in his workshop. And guess what? As you're making shoes, you see him interact with the community. As you're making shoes, you see him. You have conversations about family. You have conversations about what matter. And there's just a ton of life overlap. You're learning the skill, but you're learning more than the skill. You're learning how to be a member of that community. I think that this can happen in families. It definitely can happen in churches. But I think when there's something to share. So let me tell you a story. So at the same time that I was looking for this mentor in this kind of angsty mid early 20 something stage of life, right? Some of you identify, trying to figure it all out. I had another person in my life that I really respected, and this was a pastoral person, a person that had been in a pastor, in pretty significant roles, and just he hadn't just had the role of pastor, but this person was pastoral.
Hmm.
I felt a call to ministry. I want this person speaking to my life, and so I said, "Well, would you speak into my life?" I was just looking around, I was really, really hoping for it. And what I remember distinctly, we were eating noodles one day at this restaurant, and he looks at me and he's like, "If you want me to mentor you, you're going to have to do something that I can watch and speak into." And I was like, "Oh, you mean it's not just ideas and theories that we're about here, but..." So he's like, "If you wanted me to mentor you in ministry, you're going to have to get into ministry and do something." I was like, "Oh my goodness, that
Yeah.
makes much sense."
Well, this is why this apprenticeship image I think is so helpful, because it really gets to the point that mentorship is not a one-way street, right? And I know even in my younger years, right, you're just looking to kind of glean things off of people, right? But like, unless you're active, unless you have something to offer, even within the context of that relationship, like apprenticeship, you're actually helping somebody else in their business, right? So you have something to offer. I I think as a young person, not even just as a young person, right? Like, we can always have mentors in our lives, but thinking about what I have to offer to that relationship and how I can give is, I think, a really important piece there too, right? Um,
Great point. And if you think about, on some level, I mean, there's a level of like just spiritual and human friendship in these
yeah.
relationships, right? It's not, if it's completely transactional or utilitarian, like you're my mentor, I glean these things from you, so I can get to from point A to point B. That feels that's like something you go to like a tech school for, right? Like
That's right.
it's not like a mentoring relationship that we see in like Paul and Timothy or these other things in Christian history. And so there's a friendship element to this too. And C.S. Lewis talks about how friends walk side by side looking at the same thing, right?
Hmm.
Lovers look at each other, friends walk side by side with a shared interest. And I think that's exactly what you're saying, where there's this sense of we're working at something together.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
So
there's an affinity, right? There should be some kind of natural affinity there. I mean, I think of, even at the Center for Rural Ministry now, as we've hired various fellows,
mhm,
right? Doing like internship work and things, and there's a couple media fellows. Like, we even have a media fellow who's going to be editing this podcast.
right, shout out to
Um, but it's been really rewarding, even on that front, right? Like, our fellows, they bring something to the table that's actually significant. Like, it's not like they're just here to learn from us and learn these, media trades, or how to make a short film. Like, it's their motivation and their like hunger to learn, and their ability to offer a unique perspective, even, right? Like, there's value, even in being a mentor, for how you can learn, right? And I think that's the key here in this point.
Yeah. I mean, I'm even thinking back to meetings we've had in the last week or two where it's been like, what are some projects that you guys feel like we need to do? And just listening to them, bring
Yeah.
ideas has been amazing. So absolutely. And that's shared. I mean, I could think about some of my best relationships from like when I was a youth leader 15 years ago have been people that we actually played music together. Like I taught them how to play guitar and then they got better than I was, right? Or we were in a band spent hours practicing because we wanted to do this, but we built a friendship, and really a mentoring friendship that changes in seasons of life, but absolutely because we were working together on something.
Yep.
Well, that idea of friendship might lead well into my fifth point, which is if you're looking for a mentor, you need to realize that you have several different mentors, that you can have several different mentors who provide friendship and guidance in different areas of life. And this is where the person say, will you be my mentor? Like my one mentor doesn't really work. I think, will you just be part of my story? Will you be part of what's going on? Just like this other person will be part of my story, just like this other person. So I think there are people that have mentored me in things that I would not have wanted to mentor me in other areas of my life, right? Or who just didn't have the same values in this thing, but we did share the values in this thing. So I can think of, I had a boss throughout most of high school and college who he cut down trees. I mean, he taught me a ton about tying knots, about practical kind of like how not to get hit by a falling limb, how not to fall off a ladder.
How to not die, really. Yeah.
Work hard, how to enjoy work. But there were other things, like he wasn't a person of faith. He didn't teach me about that. But he did mentor me in these other things.
Yep.
And that's why we need to think about the fact that our life is full of mentors.
Yep.
When we start having this kind of almost, I don't even know where it comes from, this idea that one person's going to be our mentor. Like then
yes. And it's that idea, that tunnel vision is kind of what we have to escape, I think, in this whole conversation. Right. There's a really good image that I look to on this point. Now I'm a big church history person, but like in the early centuries of the church, I think St. Anthony the Great is a prime example, right? This is all the way back in the 3rd century. And I think this gives me hope because we're always looking, I think, for that one mentor. And there's so much pressure, but here's like one piece of advice. This is from his life, which is like the first big Christian work, just spread throughout the world, right? St. Anthony became like really almost this mentor to the whole world during his lifetime. But he didn't have a mentor. He didn't have really anybody to disciple him, right? But how all this got started, he had this thought, kind of prompted by the Holy Spirit, that he should pay attention to the people around him and kind of identify the virtues that they have and then implement them into his own life. So this was kind of the beginning of his monastic journey. He was the first monastic, really. But what that led to was kind of this explosion of discipleship and mentorship throughout the world. I mean, in his life, then he ended up having emperors and kings and fellow contemporary saints, would come to, get a word from him. But I think it's just a beautiful image of like, even in a context of not knowing, where to go or who to look to, like God can provide those mentor opportunities all around you if you have the eyes to see it, right?
Yep. 100%. God loves us and he takes care of us. And so there are people around, and if we look and there's no one, which your example of St. Anthony, for instance, he's doing something very new that he can't look to models necessarily for. We still have the mentor of the triune God, the Holy Spirit's witness.
That's right.
Us, and so
God will provide.
I'm getting ahead of myself to my last point, but absolutely 100% right there. Let's jump to point 6 on my list. Part of this is realizing, part of when we look for a mentor is realizing that some mentors may be lifelong, but many mentors will be a mentor for a season. Mm-hmm. And I think that helps us kind of put things in perspective, that we're not looking for this person that's like committing to like, I'm going to be with you for all of life.
That's right.
That's called marriage, not mentorship, right? So think about proximity, think about life stage. We talked about how Scott Sunquist had been a great mentor to me. And honestly, there were seasons where our proximity was really close. He was my thesis advisor of my master's thesis, right? And I would work with him very closely. I would report to him my Bible readings every day for 2 years because we were in a men's group together. But then, like, as he moved to California and I moved to Virginia, and then he moved to Boston and I'm here in Western PA, like, we don't talk as much. He's not in the same kind of mentoring thing. I can call him if I need to. But I think that's okay, right? Like, things come, seasons change. There are people in the church that I never even knew of before we planted this church that have become, in some ways, mentors to me in the church I pastor, and it's just been a beautiful thing. So I think if we realize that some mentors might be lifelong, but many mentors will be a mentor for a season, or their role in our lives will diminish over time or may ebb and flow, I think that's helpful. And that actually gets me to the next couple points that are kind of work together on the same thing. Yeah. So I would say number 7 would be set realistic expectations. And number 8 would be dial down the pressure. And I think those go together.
Yeah.
One of the things that it actually makes me a little sad, but I understand it. But when I see it, I just want to say to younger people, especially that are desperate for mentors, just like, relax. Like, you don't have to have it all figured out. Your life doesn't hinge on if you find that perfect person. Because here's what happens. We live in a comparison world. We live in a social media selfie of me and my bestie, of me and my mentor kind of world. And you're like, oh, wow, you're hanging out with them. You're doing this. You're having that person invest in you. And you're like, I'll never have that person invest in me. And you can have this kind of inward kind of reflection. And here's a shout out, especially to those of us from small places. This is even worse, right? Mm-hmm. Because distance is a real thing. And the number of people that kind of are in those celebrity level mentorships that we see are not really probably rubbing shoulders with us in our small towns and our rural areas, right? So we can have this sense of like, I'll never measure up because I don't have this, right? Or I have to go somewhere to find this. And I think you just need to actually take a deep breath, trust the Lord, and dial down the pressure on that, because God knows what you need. And he provides for us. Now, if God tells you, pick up and move, right? Have some wise counsel, make sure you're hearing him right. But like, he might. But I think a lot of times he actually has something right where you are.
Yeah.
And now you have to set realistic expectations. If you're in a small town, the chances are you're not going to have the like mentor who sold like 500,000 books. And like, this is probably not going to be your near neighbor. But there's some people there that are amazing. Gems from the Lord.
Yep. Well, and I think part of dialing down the pressure too, as well as these expectations, like this doesn't have to be like a perfect scenario, right? Mm-hmm. Like mentorship at the end of the day is about relationships, right? And getting to know this other person and being known in a valuable way. And there's going to be mistakes that are made, right? Both ways. So I think just understanding that and asking even for guidance in these situations, that's because we can't see outside of the moment that we're in. Right.
Yep. Yeah. And I think, one of the things you said just kind of spurred a thought for me. Part of dialing down the pressure is realizing that sometimes your mentors are going to disappoint you, and sometimes they'll disappoint you in really dramatic ways.
Yeah.
And if you have put your identity into that relationship, and if you put your status into that relationship, suddenly your whole life is off kilter. Now, of course, when people we trust disappoint us or hurt us or do things that we say, how could you do that? It's just human for it to be like a little in our life. But, there's a difference between a little, ground moving a little bit on your feet and like a major earthquake with aftershocks that actually disrupts everything.
Yep.
So part of dialing down the pressure and part of not some of the things we've said earlier about celebrities and about having many mentors and is not putting yourself in a position where if this domino falls, everything falls. Mm-hmm. Where highlight one mentor almost as a hero, like you said before, that can happen.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of the. It's easy to be angsty about this. I think the younger that you are, the 20 something me, I think looked at mentorship different than the 40 something me now. I know if somebody wants me to be their mentor, they're certainly not getting, um, a whole lot in that in that deal, right? So I,
Yep.
I'm not, I'm less likely, I think, to project that onto somebody else that I would want to be my mentor now. But
Well, and honestly, that's why we do need people in our lives like mentors, like, someone like you who's bringing that perspective. A 20 something needs that.
yeah,
You know,
that's right.
you've been through it. You've thought about it. You've started to see that like everything doesn't hinge on making the right decision on this or having the perfect person, that God can bring things out of the blue that drastically shape our lives because he's so good. So absolutely. All right, we have two more left. We don't have a lot of time, so I want to get to them because both of these are really important, actually. So the ninth on my list is that some mentors may be dead. You're like, that's counterintuitive.
This
I don't.
is my favorite point, the favorite title of any point that you have.
Yes, some mentors might be dead. And here's where I just want to encourage you. God has put amazing people on this planet, and they're not all alive right now. At least not alive physically on this planet. They might be alive in God's presence. And so things like books, things like the saints and the kind of people who have led in the church, the great cloud of witnesses.
Yeah.
Um, don't overlook the power of things like that, the written testimony of the church through the ages to actually shape your life and be a mentor to you. God uses that so much. And I know you have something to add here because it's not just these writings, right? But it's even more than that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think some people may not know how much our journeys have been intertwined over the years. You talk about your search for a mentor. I was in a very similar situation, coming out of college, looking for mentorship, and I think to this point, like sometimes mentorship isn't always in a physical person standing in front of you. To your point here, some mentors may be dead. Some mentors may be a church. Like the church can actually be your mentor, right? It's actually designed to be that way.
Yeah.
Like the church, the body of Christ, like God has put that into this world to lead us into his kingdom, right? And I think that's just maybe it's so true that we take it for granted
Mm.
sometimes. Or maybe we're looking for, the magic silver bullet or the quick fix, I think, that just like launches us into like where we want to be. But I think, the church as your mentor, the saints as your mentor, it requires a little bit of patience, and effort on your part. But it's actually probably the primary way
Yeah.
that we're discipled and brought into God's kingdom, right?
Yeah. I think so, and I think it's your local church, and that's why I'm a big advocate for local church history. If you don't know the history of your church, for the last however many years, it's worth digging in. One of the first things I ever wrote was a history of a local church, and it was so good for my soul, and I'm so glad I took that project on. And I just published it in the church office for that church, and it was a gift, But also the history of the church, right?
Yeah.
Over time, the church historic, the church universal around the world. So I appreciate what the author of Hebrews says, right? In Hebrews 12, he says, therefore, since we're surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that's set before us, right? And before I read anything else, I want to that's 12:1. I want to go back to chapter 11 because chapter 11 in Hebrews is what sometimes gets called the Faith Hall of Fame, right? And it's all these great folks, Abraham and Moses, and then Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, all these people that had just immense, they're almost in some ways heroes, but they were people we could look to. And then there's verse 36 to the end of the chapter. Others suffered mocking and flogging, and even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned. They were sawn in two. They were killed with the sword. They went about in skins of sheep and goats, destitute, afflicted, mistreated, of whom the world was not worthy, wandering about in deserts and mountains and dens and caves of the earth. Like, we need mentors like that. And we might not look around, when we look around the landscape of Instagram America, we might not find these folks, right? But like, the history of the church is full of people who suffered,
Yeah.
who because they loved their neighbor, who suffered because they loved Christ. And we need to sometimes look beyond our immediate circles to find this kind of thing, because so much of the mentors that are held up now are the happy, healthy folks,
Right.
the Walgreens version of what makes a life worth living, happy, healthy, and long. These are the people that our society platforms, but they're not who the church has platformed historically. And so when you think about finding mentors, I think having some history there is important. So some of your mentors may be dead. I'd say some of them should be dead, right?
Yeah.
Put it in perspective.
Well, and in our context, our American kind of brand of Christianity, at least the kind that's popular on Instagram and across platforms, right? Like, this is I think the primary temptation, and this is why point number 9, some mentors may be dead. It's, I think, all the more significant
Mm-hmm. And then
to us, just as a reminder of what our faith is actually about,
yeah,
and understanding that, just because we don't succeed in whatever our endeavors are, that's actually a pretty good sign, right?
yeah,
The road to the kingdom is not, paved with gold, in this life, and it's going to bring hardships and temptations and difficulties, and I think the only way to kind of navigate that is to look to those who've gone before us.
man, that's such a good word. And I would say that's such an important thing for us to remember. And the only thing I would want to add beyond that is actually what comes in my last point.
Yep.
Is that as great as this cloud of witnesses is, as essential and important as having mentors from history in the church is, no one comes before Jesus as our mentor.
Yep.
Jesus is the best coach or mentor you could ever have. And if you ever lose that, if I ever lose that, if any of us ever lose that in our search for a mentor, we have lost the most important thing. That's where the next verse in Hebrews 12, right? So I just read, therefore, since we're surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, right? We're looking back to this cloud. Let us lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely. Let us run with endurance the race that's set before us. These mentors can help us do that. But where are we looking? What are we running toward? Next verse, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. I distinctly remember there was a time, like, one of the ways that God freed me from this angst around mentorship came after my first year in seminary. My wife and I were taking a Perspectives on the World missionary course. It was a summer intensive, so we were down there all day. We commuted to seminary from 2 hours away, so like we didn't go home between the sessions in the morning and afternoon. And it was between those sessions I committed to 15 minutes of just quiet, which for me is hard. It still is hard. And I was sitting in the chapel and I was doing this 15 minutes of quiet. And God, it's one of the few times in my life where just almost like got my attention. And he just took me through my life. And I thought of all these times when I didn't think I had the right person in my life. And he just showed me that he was there. And then at the end, I just had this sense that he said, and I will be your coach, which is exactly, honestly, what it's saying. We look to him as the founder and perfecter of our faith. And for me, that reassurance took all the pressure away of finding a mentor, because I knew Jesus can show me the way. He is the best coach I could ever have. And if you can lean into that, if Jesus can be your mentor, if you can apprentice yourself to him, all the other things are going to fall into place. All the pressure goes down, all the striving, all the competition about, is my mentor as good as this person's mentor?
That's right.
He is the author and the perfecter of our faith, right? He holds our lives and the world together. You can trust him. And that makes everything else about mentorship fall into place.
Yeah, I think that's a great reminder. I mean, just remembering that the best a mentor can actually do is almost embody some of these things that will make you more like Jesus anyway, right?
Right.
Like that's our best hope for even finding the best possible earthly mentor. It is only going to get us to this point anyway, right? So I think that brings a level of maturity into how we can think about this whole conversation, really.
Yeah.
So, yeah, well, I think
Man, I'm
that's a wrap.
some of this out.
Is this a wrap?
Yeah,
It's a wrap. Yeah, so we hope this conversation has, been encouraging, maybe giving you some insight, maybe even a practical idea on your own journey. The Rural Ministry Podcast is part of the good work being done at the Center for Rural Ministry at Grove City College. If you found this podcast helpful, there are a few free things you can do to help us out. First, you can share this with a friend or colleague who could benefit from it. Second, you could leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. This helps more people discover our show. And lastly, you can leave us a comment or suggestion on the episode page over at the Center for Rural Ministry YouTube channel. We hope to get some good conversations started over there as well. So even on that front, if you have an idea or, maybe even a story about mentorship in your life, it'd be great if you could throw that up, because really the whole point of this conversation is like, how can we practically help each other, right? So thanks again for listening. You can learn more about our mission by visiting www.ruralministry.org. Have a great week.